to the Council's YouTube meeting after meeting. Please can I remind officers joining virtually to turn off their cameras and mute their microphones until invited to speak. And can I please remind members to speak clearly and remember to use your microphone. In addition, please speak directly into the microphone and do not turn away when speaking. This will ensure your comments are picked up for the audio and video recording, as well as improving the audibility in the room. Finally, can I please ask everyone to ensure that mobile phones and other electronic devices are on silent or switched off entirely. So with that, Claire, do we have any apologies?
Yes, thank you, Chair. We have apologies for absence received from Councillors Scott, Green and Thompson. Thank you.
Scott, Green and Thompson, thank you very much. We did invite some county councillors this evening. Have we any county councillors here tonight, Claire?
Not that I'm aware, Chair. Oh, well, obviously count.
Yes, Councillor Krasko, I'm double-hatted, so if there are some questions that relate to the County Council, I'm also happy to answer in that capacity as well, where appropriate.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Todd. Item number 2, disclosure of interests. Do we have any disclosures of interests, please?
You may have realised already, but I am a member of the County Council, and as such I need to declare a personal but non-prejudicial interest, since the County Council has responsibility for some of the areas we'll be talking about.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Todd. Moving swiftly on, the only announcement I have on point 3 is to thank everybody for being here today. This rearranged meeting from last week. Appreciate the changes you had to make in your schedule, but very grateful that you can make it today. Item number 4 is minutes of the previous meeting held on the 16th of June. Can I ask members to confirm that I can sign the meeting minutes as a correct record? Thank you very much. And move to item number 5, public participation. So very pleased to have so many people present today in public participation. I'm very much keen to measure the success of these town forums by the number of people that come along and talk, and the discussions that come from these meetings. This is a town forum, and for me it should be about the people of the town bringing matters forward for debate and discussion. So I thank everybody in advance for that. We have 6 residents here today to speak. Perhaps 5, but we'll.
Possibly 7.
We have a good number of people here to speak today. The allotted time is 3 minutes. Because we have so many people, I will keep it to 3 minutes. It will come up on the screen behind me. And I will keep you to that 3 minutes as much as I can. I will allow you to finish your sentence, of course, but if you could manage yourself as best as possible, I appreciate it. What we'll do, because there's a number of people speaking about a very similar issue, which to my mind is a lack of clarity or communication around a highway strategy for North Winchester, because there's so many people speaking about that particular issue. I'll take each of those speakers in turn, and then I will open it up principally for the county councillor to provide comment, but obviously open up to others as well. But if I could ask Mike Slynn, if you could take the position that the public speaking, and I'm sure you know how this works. You press the button, it goes red.
Got it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for inviting me. I'm speaking on behalf of Kings Barton residents. You will have, I believe, had circulated to you a copy of our petition report, which we delivered to the County Council in July. And you will also have seen some of the comments that signatories to our petition have made, there were some 3,000 signatories. It's not only residents of Kings Barton who are so concerned about keeping Andover Road open, also residents of Week and Hairstock who realise that if Andover Road is closed, their housing estate will be used as a rat run through to the centre. So what will be the consequences if Andover Road is closed? First of all, Andover Road at the moment, the section near Kings Barton, is lightly housed. All the houses are well set back on one side of the road. Firstly, Kings Barton is heavily housed, terraced housing, both sides of the road, very close to the road. Far more likely to have road traffic casualties in Barton than on Andover Road. Severance obviously will be extreme if heavy traffic runs through the middle of the new housing development. Pedestrian and cyclist movement by residents will be discouraged because all that heavy traffic. Why would people want to cycle and walk, trying to avoid all that traffic? Noise and air pollution will be worse. We estimate that air pollution will exceed WHO standards in the future. And carbon emissions will be much worse. And in the petition report, I've described why that is. So if I could move on then to talk about some of the misconceptions. I think there is perhaps a misconception. To start with, I know the City Council has this very great idea of trying to contain the amount of traffic coming into the city centre, and that's laudable, and I'm sure we'd all agree with that. But I think there's a misconception about roads and people. Roads do not generate traffic. Regardless of whether Andover Road is kept open or not, the people of Kings Barton will generate traffic. What is constraining traffic levels coming into the city centre from North Winchester is the City Road signalised junction. That's what constrains it. It's not whether Andover Road is closed or not. So what we can do to really achieve the City Council's aims of containing traffic. First of all, park and ride on Andover Road north of development is good. Alternatively, park and ride at Junction 9 would be good as well. Secondly, completion of Junction 9 works some way off, but at the moment we know that quite a few of the problems that are caused are by people who use the city centre and Andover Road as a rat run through to Junction 9, avoiding the traffic congestion on the routes to and from the A34. And just to finish, if I might mention two other things. First of all, the County Council maintained at the public inquiry that there wouldn't be a problem at the City Road Junction by additional traffic. They said that because they said that the traffic through to Junction 9, the motorway in Winnall from Kings Barton would be via the Kingsworthy Junction. That needs improving. And could we have bus and cycle and pedestrian improvements for the residents of Kings Barton to cut down the amount of traffic? Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you wrapping up quickly there. So we'll save comments until later, but next we have Andy Key. Is Andy Key in the room? Nope. Chris Gillum, please.
Just to say that I'm speaking on behalf of the WINAC Transport Group. Well, I usually come here as Friends of the Earth. WINAC this evening. When this road closure was originally proposed, some of us considered that it was rather an odd idea, seemingly diverting an arterial road through a housing estate, especially when no traffic modelling was available to show the likely rat run effects. We did understand the argument that this might have the result of taming the arterial traffic, an idea consistent with the WINAC's view that resisting traffic growth on a link would have an overall traffic reduction effect rather than a traffic diversion effect. So while we would not have proposed such an idea ourselves, we were generally agnostic about it. What, however, we would be strongly opposed to is anything which increases total radial traffic capacity. If Andover Road remains open to motor traffic, the road through Kings Barton, as currently configured, represents additional capacity and therefore additional pressure of traffic further in on Carfax Junction, on the central circulation system and on Berwick Road. We are aware of the argument that the Carfax junction does not have the capacity to take much of an increased flux of traffic into the central system from the north, though Berwick Road and Stockbridge Road do. But we cannot accept that Winchester's central traffic should be reduced through a policy of imposing junction congestion. If there is an accepted argument for retaining Andover Road, then radial capacity must be constrained by other means. One such arrangement would be to have a bar gate preventing all inward traffic from exiting Winchester Avenue at its southern end, except for bicycles, buses and emergency vehicles. We are aware of the competing interests of different residents groups in this debate. An existing community has promised a relief, perhaps as a quid pro quo for losing an open country prospect, while a new community has arrived knowing what traffic arrangement has been approved at a planning inquiry. We take no position on this. But what is clear is that both communities see traffic as a problem, just like so many other communities within urban Winchester and the wider district. It is the solution to those problems that local authorities should be addressing. Here in North Winchester, as elsewhere, the solutions are not the old, tired highway engineers' nostrums, diversions and capacity increases. The solutions have to be about sustainable transport planning. We continue to be concerned that Winchester's movement strategy has lost its way in the last year or so, but so far as we know, the main aim of that strategy, the reduction of urban traffic, is unaltered. Urban traffic reduction logically requires a reduction in the capacity of the town to accommodate motor vehicles, not an increase.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. I don't think we had Tim Fell. But I'm going to go to Charles. Actually, Nigel, are you ready and available? Thank you.
That button? Yep, you can hear me. I've apparently got 3 seconds to start on my 3 minutes. I'm going to be slightly different. I'm not going to be quite as formal as everybody else because they've done the job for me, which is really, really good because I'm here to speak about the same kind of thing. I'm representing some of the residents of Harestock Road, which is the main diversion route at the moment for traffic on the M3 works and obviously will become the main diversion route for any others. Just a thought to keep in mind, could you please think about how wide is a wheelchair? Now, one of the reasons I started thinking about that, I was diagnosed with diabetes last week, and brain starts thinking, you start thinking about what's going to happen, and you know, if I'm not careful, I could end up in a wheelchair. If I end up in a wheelchair, I'm not going to be able to go up and down our road. That's a fact. Wheelchairs are about that wide. Hell, I do music. These are musical instruments. That's the, sorry, the path at the narrowest point is that wide. And a wheelchair is that wide. The lady who's with me, her son is in a wheelchair. He cannot go up and down our road. Impossible. The point at which is restricted so badly, if he tries to come off the pavement to go around that restriction, there is not enough stopping distance for a car traveling at 40 miles an hour to stop it before they kill him. And I think that's very important. Anyone wants to feel this, go walking down Harestock Road or go driving down Harestock Road. If you want to risk your suspension, the potholes on the Harestock Road are atrocious. So what we're after here, what we're asking you to support us in is sorting out the Harestock Road. I'm not going to go into the, let's not do the diversion. I'd love to say no diversion. I'd love to have that all happen. Those kind of things. Our critical requirement here is two main things. We need the speed on the Harestock Road reduced. 40 miles an hour is dangerous. 35-meter stopping distance at 40 miles an hour will kill someone. If the pavements maintained by the council are overgrown any more than they are, even more people will have to step on the road. That is critical. Someone's going to die. On top of that, we need that road fixed. The potholes on that road, I've watched them time and time again go and fix a pothole. They pour some tar in, they stamp it down, have a smoke, have a coffee, and go on to the next one. 2 days later, all the tar's gone. That road needs to be repaired. We need your support in getting that road repaired. If you're going to carry on supporting using that as an alternate route for the M3, the Junction 9, the Andover Road, and anything else that comes along, we have to be able to have vehicles going down that road quietly. We can't sleep at night. My kids don't sleep on the nights when we have these diversions. Ease, that's what we're asking. Traffic calming, traffic speed, road condition.
Very good. Thank you, Nigel. Appreciate that. Charles, can I ask you to step forward?
I think I'm on already. Right. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My concern is the 40-mile-an-hour speed limit on Chilbolton Avenue, where I am a resident. The recent diversion of traffic overnight because of the works being carried out at Junction 9 of the M3 has highlighted the need for a reduction of the speed limit, as HGVs have thundered through Chilbolton Avenue and the Harestock Road on their way to pick up the A34. It is reassuring, to a slight extent, that the temporary warning signs erected when the diversions are in place highlight the fact that it is a residential area. Vehicle speeds should be moderated. But Chilbolton Avenue is no less of a residential area when the diversions are not in place. 2 decades ago, it was a sparsely populated road with only a small number of large homes housing single families. Now, thanks to a succession of developments, most of these homes have been converted into multiple residences for 12 to 14 families. The resident population, both of pedestrians and the cars, has grown at least tenfold. Westgate School, whose playing fields border Chilbolton Avenue, relies on the parking available for delivery and collection of many of its pupils. Venturing out onto the road from the bordering properties has to be undertaken with great care because of the density and the speed of the traffic. We are lucky that the history of accidents is mercifully small, but many of us wait anxiously for the squeal of brakes and the sound of impact, hopefully not involving any of the children from Westgate. Finally, there is the illogicality of the fact that the speed limits on the roads at both ends of Chilbolton Avenue are already set at 30 mph. So we have this anomaly of approximately 3/4 of a mile of Chilbolton Avenue, uniquely allowing 40-mile-an-hour speed, which is frequently exceeded. Introduction of a lower limit would cost nothing other than the removal of the 40-mile-an-hour signs at each end. I have recently canvassed support from local residents through the Nextdoor West Hill website, and I've received email support, the ratio of approximately 7:1 residents of the Winchester area. Those opposed to the reduction have tended to live remotely from Chilbolton Avenue. I urge this forum to take forward the reduction of speed at Chilbolton Avenue from 40 mph to 30 mph. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Thank you, Charles. Appreciate that as well very much. So I don't see Andy or Tim. So we'll wrap up that part of the resident participation. I've certainly got some thoughts and comments myself that I'd like to share. But I think first of all, then the first comment for me is that highways is obviously a county council issue, or a county council responsibility. I welcome and appreciate people coming here as a city town forum to express themselves. That's absolutely what this forum is for, regardless of where the responsibility for the solution lies. I did invite the respective county councillors to this meeting, including Councillor Edward Heron, who's responsible for highways across the county. He couldn't make the meeting last week and did suggest that he might be able to make the meeting in November, our town forum in November. So I'll be in touch with Councillor Heron, particularly with a copy of this video recording. But Councillor Todd, given you're the county councillor here, any comments from yourself, perhaps?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'm not the county councillor for the whole of Winchester, so I can make particularly informed comments on the area that I've been elected to represent, and I'm also not a portfolio holder at Hampshire either. So I think that the points have been very well made that people are highlighting. I understand the frustration and concern that residents of Kings Barton have to do with the nature of Winchester Avenue and their concern with the decision that was made in 2011 about how the road would run from the north. And I think there is also general concern, and I speak as a former opposition spokesman on transport issues, about the under-specification of the road, the lack of clarity about its design, how the 20-mile-an-hour section in the central area was going to be designed. The severance point is a very real one. So I understand the concerns that have been raised there. I actually represent people who live on Andover Road, and their concerns about severance are just as valid as people in Kings Barton. There is a plan, as has happened in Chilbolton Avenue, to have a high density of housing on both sides of the road that has already been given planning permission as part of the Kings Barton. And I do not agree with your characterisation about the distance from the road of the housing. There is a wide swale in most of Kings Barton, followed by a separate transfer road, followed by the housing. So it is not bang up to the edge of the road in the way that, for example, some of the residents I represent face in Chilbolton Avenue in some cases, certainly in Stockbridge Road. So I think it's important that we take a balanced view of the issues. Andover Road also has huge severance issues, also has increasing number of people living on it with a plan to have many more people living on it. Also risks severing the very large number of people who will be living in Kings Barton from the services that we would want them to be walking to and cycling to, such as the schools in Week, such as the centre in Week, Waitrose and the like. That connectivity is important as well. So my view, so that severance issue is an issue, and I strongly support the point that was made by Friends of the Earth, partly because I'm also the county councillor for the Carfax Junction, but having two main roads, which are currently designed as feeder roads into the centre, running in parallel, would be an act of insanity in terms of urban planning and in terms of traffic planning. So whatever the option is, it can't be a road that has been designed to carry all the traffic from the north of the city into central Winchester through Kings Barton, and a road that currently exists to travel to carry all the traffic into Winchester down the Andover Road, operating in parallel. That makes no sense at all. And I'm also aware, I don't currently represent Priorsdean Road, but I did at one point in the past, and I do represent people on Worthy Road, but they are also really concerned about the potential knock-on of a closure of Andover Road. And that is what has led to my representations to people to say, we need a system for the north of Winchester, because Andover Road in its current form, alongside the currently planned form of Winchester Avenue, does not make any sense. And what we would need from the County Council, as the body responsible for highways, is a system that looks at the problems we've heard about on Hairstock Road, that feed into problems in Priorsdean Road when there's heavy congestion, that looks at Andover Road, that looks at Winchester Avenue that looks at Worthy Road and comes up with a proposal that can handle the traffic that is coming in from the north at the same time as when we see, for example, extra development potentially at the Sir John Moore Barracks site, is ensuring that we improve the options from people from the north of the city, whether they live in Kings Barton, whether they live in Harestock or Week or further to the north, improve the options for them to be able to choose sustainable forms of transport, such as walking and cycling. And one question that needs to be answered by the proposal, just to say, well, all we need to do is reopen the Andover Road, is the dramatic loss in potential walking and cycling ability capacity in from the north. So where I come out, and what I have advocated and continue to advocate, is basically to say Winchester Avenue, as currently designed, is clearly not fit for purpose and is causing great concern to the residents who live. But Andover Road, when we have 2,000 houses, Kings Barton, when we have extra development to the north of the city, is also not fit. When we have the houses that have already been given planning permission in 2011, is also not fit for purpose in its current form and cannot be left as it is, because that makes no sense in terms of how traffic from the north comes into the city. And for example, if you have a 20-mile, if the current scheme, the current arrangements were to go ahead and you had a 20-mile-an-hour section of the Winchester Avenue, you would be left with Priorsdean Road and Worthy Road both on 30-mile-an-hour limits, and a 20-mile-an-hour limit on the main feeder road. And that also makes no sense. So actually, in their current form, Priorsdean Road and Worthy Road both need changes in order to better support a sane approach to managing traffic coming in from the north. So from my point of view, and the point I have made repeatedly to county officers, is this is not just about whether you divert the road or not. You need to come up as highways engineers with a system that works for the whole of the north of the city, that is helping to reduce traffic through, for example, the installation of a north park and ride, which I believe is absolutely vital, by encouraging walking, encouraging cycling, and ensuring that people have better, safer, more attractive, low carbon ways of being able to get to the city. Now, there's a second issue which has been raised where where the county council, and again, I don't speak for the county council, I advocate things for the county council, needs to do a better job, and that relates to speeds. Now, I know the situation in Chilbolton Avenue, which I represent, very well. I have been advocating lower speed limits there for many years. It has proved surprisingly difficult to make progress because the current speed policy at Hampshire County Council is based on a metric called KSIs, people who are killed and seriously injured. And thankfully, nobody yet has been killed or seriously injured because of speed on Chilbolton Avenue. But we still need an approach that recognises the dramatic change. And there is some prospect of progress on that. For the time being, the policy that the traffic management team are required to follow is focused on killed and seriously injured. Through the 20s Plenty campaign, 20s Plenty for Hampshire campaign, and through pressure from councillors, there is now a review underway which is looking at how we justify lower speeds to support walking, cycling, sort of the wider low carbon agenda. And I'm a member of that review, and we are taking evidence. We've spoken to the Welsh Government, we've spoken to national highways experts, we've spoken to all kinds of people, we've spoken to the police, we've got lots of evidence from lots of different people about how Hampshire's speed policy can be changed. And at the same time, there's also a discussion going on about what's called LTP4, which is the kind of overall governing document that decides how roads are designed. That may take a bit of time to get the policy change. At the same time, there is other work going on through the City of Winchester Movement Strategy, through what's called the Mini Holland bid that's happening, through the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, and partly because people in Chilbolton Avenue are well organised and articulate and have done a good job of writing into people when consultations have gone out. There is now very clear recognition by the integrated transport teams and the strategic transport teams about the problems with Chilbolton Avenue and how it stands in the way of walking and cycling. So in terms of the immediate things that are in front of me, I will, continue to Chilbolton Avenue, I will continue to represent you on that particular issue. On the issues such as potholes and speed on the Harestock Road, I have a great deal of sympathy with your view. But the person you need to talk to is probably Councillor Warwick about that, since she represents that area. And on the Andover, Road diversion, but also the Winchester Avenue plans, my view remains that there isn't a straightforward single change and everything will be fine change that will work. We need a proper, thought through, integrated response that looks at a revised design for the Winchester Avenue, revised design for the Andover Road where it to be kept open, and one of them would have to be limited in some way because you can't maintain a double set of capacity into town. Revised speeds as a minimum, and probably design for Priorsdean Road, and a revised design for Worthy Lane and Worthy Road, where, as an example of where change needs to happen, I know from the residents who live there and live next to it that, crossings need to be improved. There are lots of people living in Kings Barton. People want to be able to walk safely into the city. They currently can't do it. The crossings are in the wrong place and there aren't enough of them. So again, there's a lot that needs to be done, but we need a wider systematic approach to what happens in the north of the city. So a few of you here are actually represented by me as a county councillor, speaking as your county councillor. That is my view on the particular issue and what I continue to advocate.
Thank you, Councillor Todd, and I very much appreciate you being here and speaking as a member of the County Council rather than representing the County Council as a whole. Greatly appreciate you doing that because you're the only one here. I can see possibly other people wanting to speak as city councillors. Councillor Lurley.
Thank you. I particularly wanted to pick up the issue of the Harestock Road as a St Barnabas councillor and very long-standing Harestock resident. Going back to the killed and seriously injured, I mean, what most people don't realise is that 40 years ago there was no pavement at all on Harestock Road. It was literally a country lane, despite having heavy traffic running along it. Even then, the pavement actually appeared after my music teacher, Henry Beaufort, was killed walking along that road. And it's a tragedy that we have to wait for those kind of incidents to happen to get serious action on our roads, and that is still the case today. I regularly walk and cycle along that road. The pavement is not fit for purpose. In places it's difficult to get a pushchair through, let alone, as has been mentioned, a wheelchair. And it's really important we recognise that Harestock Road is actually the road which was anticipated by the County Council to be the most heavily impacted in terms of increases in traffic as a result of the building of 2,000 homes at Kings Barton. The biggest percentage increase in traffic of any road in the local area. And I think it's important that we do consider that and take action. As Councillor Todd has pointed out, what we need is a plan which deals with the issues of all the roads that we have in the north of Winchester, particularly with the likely proposal to bring forward extra housing at Sir John Moore Barracks, which will put even more pressure on the local road network. As Councillor Todd said, there is no simple solution. We need a more comprehensive plan, but we need a plan which does pick up some of these local issues around inadequate pavements, too high traffic speeds, and so on. And I'm really supportive of any proposal that comes forward that looks at the area holistically and doesn't just deal with one single issue.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Reach.
Thank you. We heard some very powerful personal testimony, so thank you for doing that. I just thought something that really resonated. I, along with Councillors Radcliffe and Edwards, represented Michael to the south side of the city, but are affected by much of the same issues. I think, sorry, was it Nigel? I didn't quite catch your name. I don't know if you could hold up your medium-sized musical instrument, because that's about how far our front door is from Bar End Road. I personally raised it with National Highways, the fact that we've got HGVs transiting through the city all night long. I can promise you that wakes us up in the middle of the night as well. And could I respectfully perhaps request that the leader of the council might write to National Highways and ask them to consider diversionary routes, at the very least reminding their contractors not to be driving and parking HGVs in residential areas where they can avoid it, please.
Thank you, Councillor Reach. Did you want to respond on that?
We'll put a different hat on now. No, I'm very happy to do that. And that is not, I mean, I actually work very closely with the county officer who is responsible for diversions. There are limits to what we can do in terms of how that's managed. They should not be driving past your front door. There is an issue at the moment in terms of where the routes are managed. Conversations that we've had when we've had other problems with diversions, actually I'm speaking as a county councillor again here, is that what we've tried to do is move the diversion north. So we had a big problem with people coming down the A34 and through the city, and so worked with county council officers and Highways England to get big diversions put up on the A303 to be sending people across to the M3 rather than down the A34. So there's a lot that goes on to try and avoid these kind of issues, but I agree. I'm very happy to put forward that point of view in a letter on behalf of the City Council to highlight the issues that we are having with diversions. And indeed, I'm intending and have promised that I will be writing to the County Council about the wider issue about the roads in the north of Winchester. So that will be me as leader of the City Council writing to say we are willing to collaborate. We will work with the County Council. They are the Highways Authority, and this is the list of problems that we think need to be addressed and that they need to factor into their thinking about the road system.
Very good, thank you. So I think we've had a very good discussion here about highways in North Winchester. There were other people that wish to speak who couldn't be here tonight, and a large amount of written submissions. I think the key point that's come from those submissions that I'd like to raise additionally, which was mentioned somewhat by Charles, but the west of Andover Road is pretty much education central for Winchester. If you look at the route that's been discussed, which is the route, the diversion route for the M3 down the Harestock Road, Stockbridge Road, Chilbolton Avenue, down to Romsey Road, you've got hundreds of children every day going to school along that route. You start moving high volume, high traffic down those roads, then you'll have your KSIs. So that's the main concern for me, is that west of Andover Road, hundreds of thousands of, well, hundreds of kids. You've got Harestock Primary, Henry Beaufort, Week Primary, the college, Peter Simmons, Westgate, Western, up to King's, and St Peter's Primary. We need to do something before there's a serious accident.
I think as a point of clarification, I'm not aware that the diversion has ever consciously been operated other than in response to accident or something similar during the daytime period. So the discussions, speaking as a resident of Stockbridge Road, one does notice when the trucks start running. The diversions are generally overnight when they're doing full lane closures on the M3 and other such things. I will take your point, but I think it's important that that is when it caused particular disruption. That's been my experience at least.
Point taken, but if you start including the potential for rat runs as well, if we don't address the Andover Road, then we do have that issue, I would suggest.
Absolutely, and that's why we need a system that works for the north of the city. And, you know, let's not forget, all of the secondary children in Kings Barton will be crossing the Andover Road to go to school.
Very good. Well, thank you everyone for joining in that discussion. You're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. It won't be as nearly as exciting. We're talking about budgets this evening, but you are more than welcome to stay. We do have one more resident to speak, Mr. Ian Tate.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak. I'm tempted to reply to some of the other comments where I may have a different view, but there we are. As has been mentioned in the minutes of the last meeting, I spoke about the issue of begging in the town centre. I made specific reference to work undertaken around King's Walk and would now like to acknowledge that the actions taken by the council have proved successful that area. So very well done and thank you. That said, I continue to be very concerned, as do I think many other residents, about the number of beggars on our streets and the impact they have on people's perception of our city. I'm certainly not suggesting that we brush this issue under the carpet, and I'm acutely aware that it is a complex and multifaceted problem. However, leaving people begging on our streets isn't a good thing, particularly for those who beg. I would comment that I've had quite a few friends who've lived in Westview, Milford House and the old Sussex Street hostel. So I think I've got some sense of the issues and problems that confront them. However, going back to begging, most obviously it means that the public give them cash, and very sadly that does not help them. Those funds are invariably spent on drugs and alcohol. This creates a dependency culture with very worrying side effects of high levels of theft from city centre stores. And if you know the people who are begging, you can follow their progress through the court's notices of their convictions. That's not good for them. That's not good for the premises that they're stealing from. I regularly see, as lots of city centre residents, the people just literally walk into Marks and Spencer's, Pretts and Greggs, and they just take the goods without any intention of paying, nor are they ever challenged, nor would I ever challenge them. That's not good for anyone that happens. There is the Diverted giving scheme, which was introduced to absolutely give residents an opportunity to put their funds into a proper depository. It does not work, and it needs either to be kick-started. I would again ask the Town Forum to look at this issue along with the bid and come up with a plan of action. I'd like to finish by saying that I do sense that there is a genuine desire from the leader of this council to address city centre issues. So I say that very publicly. My bugbear, the tarmac area outside Tesco's, has been repaved. I registered to speak, to have a go at the quality of the work, and between the meeting being delayed, the contractor went back and finished it off to a very high standard. So it's not all bad news, but the human concerns that I raise about those people on our streets is one that I hold very, very deeply, as I know that virtually every member of the Town Forum does. So some good things, but sadly some bad things still to be done. But thank you very much. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Tate, for the acknowledgement of the work that's been done, but also the continuing focus on the personal matters there in terms of people. There was a number of responses to your points last time, and also we had Chief Inspector Turton who made some very good points as well. Are there any members who would like to respond at this point? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tate. So moving on, we move to item 6, the Winchester Town Account Financial Planning 2022-23, WTF 310. And for this one, we have Darren Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Chair, although I would have to disagree with the not very exciting comment just to start. So this is the paper in front of you is the first of 3 papers for the essentially setting the budget for 23-24 for the Winchester Town account, and also the medium-term financial plan and forecasts. If I could skip through the opening part to 11.9 to highlight the Town Accounts Group, met at the end of August to review the latest forecasts and to start the budget preparations for next year. It was obviously noted that forecasts have changed substantially since the budget was set in February. Everyone's aware of inflation at the moment and how high that has reached. Potentially some favourable news recently, but that is still quite volatile and inflation is very high. The budget was set in February to maintain the 10% reserve balance and also gave some additional flexibility within the budget to address recreation and open space requirements. Inflation is putting some pressure on that, which will need to be addressed as part of this process. So moving on to 11.1, revised inflation forecasts are shown in the Appendix 1, and the CPI reaching 10.1% in July when the paper was produced. A 10% forecast inflationary increase next year is a 60k baseline cost to the town, which is a considerable amount for a town budget of just over £1 million per annum. Cemeteries as well we've had to reduce the income forecast by £20,000 per annum and also increase expenditure forecasts. So that's widened the net cost of cemeteries projections, which were also shown in Appendix 1. Urgent tree maintenance expenditure has come forward. There's currently a tree survey programme which has been ongoing for a little while. That is identifying a significant amount of tree work, meaning overspends to existing budgets, resulting in an increased forecast of 50,000 for 22-23, and there will be consideration of whether the budget needs to be increased from 23-24 onwards to deal with that work. And finally, we've also had indication that bus shelter maintenance works are under review. There are works needed in that area, and that's currently being planned at the moment with a paper due to come to the town forum, so potentially another additional cost there. So a lot of additional cost pressures on the town this year. Inflation pressures, as we've said, are considerable. A precept increase of over 5% would be required. Just looking at the precept on its own, just to cover increased inflation costs of 10%. There are also resources to be considered for the North Walls Park plan. Plan identifies significant resource requirements phased over the medium to long term. It's obvious that significant external funding will be required to meet that plan, to deliver some of the aims of that plan. And to note that the refreshed forecasts show an assumed 3% annual precept. That's just an assumption at this stage. That's for review as part of the budget process. Moving on to identifying resource requirements. We don't know, we haven't had notification from government at this point for what the capping limits will be for the town and district for next year. Both are tied together, and for quite a number of years now it's been set at £2% or £5, which is equated to around 3% for Winchester City Council. That's the assumption that we're continuing with at the moment, but we don't know for certain. We think that it's unlikely to change significantly if it does change. There is some scope obviously within that for different increases or whatever plans are put forward for the district and town precepts, which could potentially give additional capacity to the town to increase by more than 3% as it did for 22-23 potentially. And moving forward to fees and charges, just to basically highlight There's not significant fee and charge income within the town, but cemeteries is the largest of such, with just over £140,000 of income coming from cemeteries, and open spaces of just over £40,000. Community infrastructure levy is a very key source of funding for the Winchester town outside of the precept and town reserve. The balance stood at just over 1.2 million in April 22. There are now significant commitments and proposals that have come forward against that. Still, that includes North Walls Pavilion, KGV Pavilion, fencing and floodlight improvements at North Walls, proposal from Abbots Barton Scouts, Week Access Road and Milland Road, and moving back to 11.7, there's also been a request of 50,000 of SIL funding for the park plan improvements in relation to KGV, and also further £200,000 towards the KGV new build pavilion, where an additional budget requirement of £1 million has been put forward as a requirement for that. And moving back down, just to give an idea of sensitivity, in 11.19, contract inflation is around £6,000 per 1%. So if inflation did rise further to 15%, that would be an additional £30,000 per annum. Utilities are only around £11,000 in 21-22, so less of an impact, but obviously utilities have seen a higher increase, so a 200% forecast does give an additional cost of £22,000 per annum. 1% precept increase generates additional funding of £11,000 per annum, and the baseline forecast of a tax base increase, which will be updated as soon as we get the actual figures together, is 1.2%, which is the long-term average. That can fluctuate from year to year, generates about an additional £13,000 per annum, and that's included within the projections. The next section identifies capital expenditure, which are currently within the budgets. So many of them relating to SIL funded projects, the North Walls changing pavilions again and King George V, play area refurbishments, which are currently funded from the Winchester Town Reserve, North Walls floodlight and fencing upgrade, and the North Walls tennis surface upgrade too. 11.23 identifies that in light of the current budget pressures identified in the report, it's considered appropriate to review the financing of future capital expenditure, such as play area refurbishments. One option could be to borrow from the district for future expenditure plans rather than funding the entire amount up front from the town reserve. The effect of this would be to increase baseline expenditure to cover the principal repayment of the loan plus interest, but it would release significant reserve funds over the medium term. That's one potential option that will be considered at the town accounts informal group. And finally, just noting that the reserves, the current strategy is a 10% to hold a minimum of 10% within reserves of net annual expenditure. That's been highlighted as an area to review as well with the town account informal group. So that will be reviewed to determine whether 10% remains sufficient, and to highlight again that currently, based on the projections in Appendix A, there is currently a shortfall identified within those projections at the end of 2023-24, where the reserve does drop to a low balance at the moment. So plans will be considered as part of the town accounts group, which will meet up again next month in preparation for the November town forum budget options paper, and that paper will provide initial options for how to address the current deficits that have been identified in this paper. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Darren. You're right. It's one of the most interesting budgets we've had for some time, I would suggest. So we're asked to Note the financial projections in Appendix A and agree the budget timetable for 23-24. Any questions at this time? Councillor Ferguson, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kennedy, for taking us through the paper. I am part of the town accounts, so I have seen this paper at an earlier stage. The question I want to ask is to what extent you feel that the budget that we're kind of looking at now is likely to remain the same or likely to change. I know it's very hard to budget in uncertain times, and there are different factors which we can't hold on to because everything is changing. But to what extent do you feel that the budget we now have is a budget we can rely on?
So I think you're talking about the budget forecast probably more than the actual budget itself. Obviously, I highlighted the sensitivity, and it is fair to say that there's a huge amount of volatility within that at the moment. Inflation is likely at the moment to remain higher than we've seen previously. So it's unlikely to drop dramatically, but the picture has changed since we last met up as an accounts group, and those forecasts will continue to be updated. As I said, every 1% change in contract inflation is about £6,000 per annum. So therefore, those core forecast assumptions that we have in at the moment, which is 10% for 23-24, 6% for 24-25, 4% for 25-26, and then back down to the 2% in 26-27, are provisional estimates at this time and are likely to change before we get to the final budget. But I think it does highlight, even with that sensitivity, that there are still budget pressures to address resulting from that inflation. The exact parameters of that obviously won't be clear until later on, completely clear, but there are certainly pressures there.
No other questions at this point. I think a couple of questions for me. Could you just talk me through the town precept again, and how it works subject to the district inflation rate for council tax? If the district council tax goes up, how does that impact on the town precept?
Yeah, we can certainly put forward, and we normally do, put forward a table in the next paper. But essentially, and we are assuming that the rules stay the same as they have been for a number of years in the past, that we're subject to the £5 of capping, then it's £5 overall combined with the town and the district. Obviously, the district is significantly larger than the town, so therefore, if the district increased by less than 3%, then there's a multiplier effect that the town could then increase by significantly more than 3%, and still keep within the overall £5 cap. But we can certainly highlight the different potential impacts in the next paper to give an idea of that.
Thank you, Jez. I'm just wondering if inflation continues to increase and that impacts on district, and that limits what we can do with our precept, I would imagine.
Well, I can't comment. Obviously, I can't comment on behalf of Cabinet at this time, but yes, both are party to the same inflationary pressures.
Very good, thank you. I will ask questions if nobody else will. Sil, maybe I'll ask either yourself, Darren, or Dawn. How does Sil work? In that, if I look at page 16, There's a proposed split of £200,000 from Town Seal and £800,000 from District Seal to the AGV new build pavilion. So from my understanding, when development takes place, there's a seal charge and a community infrastructure levy that's charged to developers, and we get to keep in the town, we get to keep 15% of that, and then we give you 85% of that. So if I've got £100 of seal, I get to keep 15. I give you, Dawn, I give you 85. If I then want to do something in the town, and it costs me 100 to do something, I've got £15 for that. I go and ask you for money, District Seal, and you give me 80. So I'm £5 short. You've kept £5 that was originally mine. So you're charging me a 5% management fee for looking after my seal. Not only that, but you've had all that, you've had the £85 and you've got the interest on that £85. And you'll only give me the £80, I suggest, if I can demonstrate that what I'm doing with my £100 is going to give value to the district as a whole. And I'd like to explore whether that's right. I'd like to see a solution where Winchester, as the county town, which is the sustainable site for development, where housing is targeted in the right place, everybody agrees that it should be in the town. When we have still contributions from developers, we get to keep more of that money and we can use it for what it's supposed to be used for, which is for infrastructure. But we have a larger pot of money rather than the £15 from every 100. We've got a larger pot of money that we can then use to address some of the infrastructure issues that have been raised today by residents. I'd like to keep more of that for the town. I'd like to keep the interest on that. And then when I do something for the district, I'd like the district to put money in rather than we have to always provide something for the district from the town.
Chairman, question.
I move to debate there, Chair.
So just to clarify, Mrs. Adey, it is correct that actually there's no requirement for the City Council, which is the body that is legally authorised to receive money, to give any money to the Town Forum at all. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But we have made the decision to treat it the same as other parishes, where they receive 15% of the money, and approximately about half the district money is generated in Winchester. And currently, am I right in understanding that we're getting pressure from other parts of the district because, for example, they are seeing large amounts of community infrastructure levy spent in the town?
That's correct. We received a councillor question just this morning in full cabinet when we were talking about your SIL at cabinet level with regards to spend across the.
Yeah, I would also add to that in response to Councillor Crass's question that we need to remember that Winchester is actually not the only centre in the district which provides facilities to a wider area. New Alresford does, Bishop's Waltham does, Havant provides facilities to areas such as west of Waterlooville and Denmead. So it's not quite as simple as saying that Winchester's the heart of the district, so it should get the majority of the funding. What is correct is that funding should broadly reflect the pressures on local infrastructure, because that's what infrastructure levy is meant to pay for. But it's not quite that simple. And the other thing is that we're also being asked by county, for example, to spend money on highway infrastructure. We may well see requests coming forward from the health service. There's a lot more other kinds of infrastructure than just the kind the town forum collects. In fact, the district council, and I did write the paper on this, so I do know, does not even have to give the town forum the 15% because we are not a parish council. It is a choice of the district council to use that community portion of SIL to use at the discretion of the town forum.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Loney, for answering my question. But I hope you got where I was coming from in terms of the logicalness of how the funding works, how we can get more money into the town account in terms of the SIL, and how we can do more in the town for infrastructure. Councillor Todd.
I think there's a key point here, which is actually, if we're serious about the kind of infrastructure that you're talking about, then the negotiation is with the county and how we use community infrastructure levy, frankly, across the entire district as it is raised in order to address the highways issues, which I know are a huge matter of concern. And on that basis, the legal situation is, whether we like it or not, that with the exception of places with an adopted, what's it called, local something, anyway, 15% of the, only 15% can go to the parishes and the town forum, and therefore in practice a better way forward is, as is currently being discussed, how we use the community infrastructure levy strategically as a district to engage with the county and to engage with the wider strategic needs of the entire district, particularly in terms of highways. That conversation is going on at the moment. So there was a SIL paper at Cabinet this morning which is laying out a strategic approach to using SIL, or highlighting that there will be a strategic review as to how we use SIL to achieve exactly the objectives that we need to try and deliver. But the thought is, there is no future where somehow magically the town forum gets a level of funding which parishes do not. That would not be fair, and it would not stand up to legal challenge. That the discussion we need to have as a district is how we take the SIL and properly address the needs across the entire district. And I think it's important, actually, when we talk about the Winchester settlement, that we recognise that if we're serious, for example, about tackling the issues in the wider area, there are places that are parished and separate from this city, such in SIL terms, such as Badger Farm, such as Kingsworthy, such as Headbourne-Worthy, who aren't covered by City SIL, who will also need to be part of those discussions as well, which is why that interdependency between the town forum and the nearby settlements and people who are frankly part of the same Winchester settlement, just happen to be in a different organisational bit of it, need to be included in those conversations. That's very much the intent of the SIL review that is starting at the moment. And what I suggest is a productive way forward, which the town forum is fully entitled to do, is to make that strategic input to say, how do we design our district-wide system and our district-wide use of SIL to achieve the kind of strategic objectives that you outlined in your earlier question/comment.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Radcliffe.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your question. I appreciate you asking such a challenging question. I think it does seem, perhaps, to people looking from afar, as if the town area is, having to make do with crumbs from the table. It may not be the only settlement in the district, but the urban area of Winchester does, I think, contain almost, in fact, half of the residents of the district, or close to. It is also clear that we are under huge budgetary pressure, and it's really a point that I'd like clarification on. I think that we, councillors representing the unparished areas, the town itself, are representing the only part of the district that is prevented from increasing precept, which the parish councils are able to do. So if you live in another parish part of the district, the parish councils have access to more revenue raising powers than we do here in the town. And yet we have a large population, high needs, major projects on our books, and we are unable either to access more SIL or to increase the precept to help fund this work and meet the expectations of our residents. So I think we are in a uniquely pressured position here. It is useful to look at how we can alleviate some of those financial pressures.
Thank you, Councillor Radford. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to add, I'm not sure of the exact figure, Councillor Radcliffe, but I think the town actually equates to around 40% of our district population. That may have adjusted slightly with the census, but that's always the figure that I worked on. When we talk about town SIL at 15% of the pot, what we're going to see in the paper that's going to come after this is the town does actually benefit from district SIL. District SIL does also get spent in the town, and the additional funding that's needed for the King Charles V pavilion, 800,000 of that is coming from district SIL. 200,000 potentially from town forum SIL if the town agrees to that today. And when we look at the difference in percentages of what originally was being put in by the district compared to the town, the district's percentages increased really quite substantially, from about less than 20% to almost 38%. So the town does benefit, and district SIL is spent in the town as much as the town forum SIL. So I think that's important that people remember that we also do benefit from the district SIL.
Sorry, Councillor Ferguson, you've challenged me on numbers, which I will take you up on. If you're looking at the funding from the district SIL into the King's Barton, into the King George V Pavilion, I don't want anyone walking away thinking the district's doing town any favours in that regard. If the town's putting in 450,000, in order for the town to do that, in order for the town to have £450,000 of SIL that we can put in, that means we would have given the district SIL £2.55 million based on a 15 to 85% ratio. So for us to have £450,000, the district would have taken 2.55 million. The district is putting in 1.25. The district's putting in half of what we've already given it.
Sorry, Councillor Crass, I was referring to the percentages that were originally allocated between district and town SIL when we looked at the project funding, which was agreed before, where the town SIL was accounting for 10.8, the district SIL 19.5 under 2.8 of the report we're going to go on to. And under the new scenario, the town SIL will account for 14% and the district at 38%. So there's a slightly different percentages.
I think it's important to remember, in addition, the capital receipts is district council funding. That's not coming out of town account money.
Very good, thank you. The point I'm looking to make, which I think is being understood, is that there's a lot of money in the district SIL which is generated from the town.
That's absolutely clear. It is reflected in the plan, it is reflected in current spending, and it will be reflected in the SIL review that is about to happen. So I'm not entirely sure what the point is that you're making. The town forum is not going to suddenly magically get control of district SIL, because effectively it would mean that we would lose the ability to do any district activity at all. And as we've talked about, if you look at Winchester as a settlement, there are quite a few parishes that are involved and need to be involved as stakeholders, and we're taking a strategic view towards the city, then they will need to be partners, and their needs and those city councillors will need to be taken into account as well. So, you know, it is certainly not the case that, to be honest, the pressure we are getting at the moment is from the rest of the district asking why so much money is being spent in Winchester. That will be the debate at full council. That will be what we hear from other people. And when we look at the figures, currently, broadly, and certainly in terms of current forward-looking plans, the split of spending between the city and the rest of the district is roughly fair. It is, you know, the city is not getting a bad deal at the moment. And that, if it were to be getting a bad deal, that is something that the strategic review can address. But certainly that is not the perception of people outside the city in terms of how the SIL that they are being paid for the development that they are accepting, whether enough is being spent in their area. I think it is important as a district that we are fair to all parts of the district. Obviously, everyone is going to make a case for why their particular area should get support. But I think what we need is an approach that, which I believe we already have, that does a fair job for the entire district.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'm not disagreeing at all in terms of a fair approach. I'm just wanting to make sure that people are aware that we're not getting more than our fair share in the town of the district SIL, if that is an expectation.
And you're not getting less either.
I'm not suggesting that either. Dan Kennedy.
So I just wanted to quickly clarify that the neighbourhood portion is 15% or 25%, 25% where there's a neighbourhood plan. So it's my understanding the town received 25%, not 15%, but I can clarify that.
No, we have no neighbourhood plan, so it is the 15%. Currently only Denmead have proper neighbourhood plan.
Very good. Well, I think we managed to collapse questions and debate into that one session there, which is more debate, Councillor.
Yeah, more debate. Ignoring SIL. Clearly this paper is setting out the background to what will be some very difficult budget decisions we need to be making in the next few months. Like councils across the country, we are being heavily impacted by contract inflation and general costs rising. I don't know quite why I'm getting so much feedback. Darren highlighted some of the additional calls that we're seeing coming forward on the town account, and there are obviously also additional demands that we as members wish to make on those town funds and the work we wish to see done in our own neighbourhoods. And I think it's going to be really important that we work together over the next few months as a town forum in order to prioritise that and make sure that we are carefully managing our spending and also looking forward. Darren highlighted that there is potential for us to look at borrowing funding for large-scale projects. You know, for example, we have the North Walls Park plan coming up, which is an area where I know we're very keen to see that implemented and then move on to some of the other areas in the town which are in need of attention. And we will have to very carefully manage that. Obviously, that is going to be a challenge, and we will have to look at whether we're cutting back in some areas, as well as thinking about where we might want to spend more and targeting our funding effectively. Obviously, this is just a first glimpse, but I think that page 24 table showing how far we're likely to go into deficit is really important that we bear in mind as we make decisions going forward. That 10% reserve is a very narrow one. To put it into context, a lot of parish councils will have reserves that are equivalent to their annual income, so that they can afford to make major investments and deal with big shocks that might come through. Traditionally, we haven't done that because we have effectively the district council funds to fall back on. We can borrow money from the district in the event of significant need, but we do need to think going forward about whether that 10% reserve in an age potentially of much higher volatility is going to be enough going forward. So yeah, as the Chinese curse goes, may you live in interesting times.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Ernie. And unless anybody has anything else, I think that was a very good summation of the situation. So thank you very much for that. I think we have done a good job of reviewing and commenting as was requested, and look forward to more work from the Town Account Group. Thank you very much. Thank you, Darren. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
So now we move along to the Town Forum Grant Programme. And for this we have Jane, I understand.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to introduce this paper this evening on behalf of Melissa Fletcher, as she's currently on leave and not able to attend this rescheduled meeting. Winchester Town is very fortunate to have a flourishing voluntary and community sector, and the Town Forum community grant schemes continue to support organisations and the communities that they serve. This paper reports on the Town Forum community grants awarded in the year 2021-22 and proposes the reopening of grant programmes for the current financial year. The grant programmes proposed are very similar to those offered last year. However, we know that the rising cost of living is having a significant impact on the voluntary and not-for-profit sector, so options for addressing this through the grant schemes have been included. It should also be noted that the contract that we have for the Crowdfund Winchester platform comes to an end in December 2022, and a review is currently being undertaken to decide what will follow next. The outcome of this piece of work will be discussed by the Housing and Environment Policy Committee in December, with subsequent updates given to the Town Forum. When we acknowledge the grants awarded in the last financial year, it's clear that there's still some work to be done to ensure that the budget is spent in full this year. There are a number of suggestions for how this might be carried out in practice, and we've included these in the section entitled Ensuring Budget Spend in this paper. One recommendation is that we use the grant budget flexibly to allocate funds between different grant programmes to best meet the demand for individual grants. Finally, this report highlights the important role of Town Forum members in helping to increase the awareness of the grant schemes that we have on offer. And you will see reference in the report to information that will be provided to you to help promote these grants. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate that very much. I should probably say some words as well, given that this is coming from me as well, under the Vision and Grants Programme. What's interesting for me, and where some of this comes from, is that we're not spending the grants quick enough through the year. We don't spend all the grant money. We don't give out and support residents, community groups to the extent that we can. The last couple of years, we have underspent significantly the grant money, particularly and specifically that money that was put towards the crowdfunding opportunity. I think there's a couple of reasons for this. One is that we have a governance challenge where we wait each year for the new governance groups to be formed and for new governance to be launched. So we don't launch the grants program quick enough. I'd like to see how we could have a rolling grants program in place where we can look at grants being offered through the whole course of the year rather than launch it each September and give us less time to get those grants spent. When you do look at the grants that have been spent, and you see those on page 34, as Jane spoke to, we've got a good number of spend in the small grants program. We spent some 8.5 thousand in that small grants program compared to the 40,000 we've got overall for grants when you combine both the small grants and the crowdfunding. And many of those were for the full 500. So given we can spend and support community groups with that, with £500 tranches, but we're not spending that crowdfunding, which is some 33,000. Opening up the small grants program and extending it to a value of 1,000 would enable us to use more of that money that's been set aside for crowdfunding, especially when you look at what was spent in crowdfunding in previous years, where the amount of 1,000 may well have done the job on page 35 for most of the applications. So we would be effectively cutting red tape from the requirement to do crowdfunding, and we would be getting more money out to the people that need it quicker. And given we've only got 6 months of this year to get the money out, I think that's important. I do want to look at where the money is going and how effective it is. And without stealing his thunder, Councillor Batho will be doing an audit very much in line with the vision principles of what we could do to encourage and support more community groups, is to do an audit of where the money is spent. And he'll need officer support in order to complete that audit, but to look at where the money is being spent. And we can see a lot, for example, is being spent in St Bartholomew's. So there's a question around, is that support just being provided in St Bartholomew's, or is it being spent, or are those services being offered across the whole of the town? So I'll probably say some more later, but that's kind of enough for me in terms of I'm very keen to get the money out, get it into the people's hands who can do something with it. And that's why you've got this paper in front of you, and I'm looking for some good debate on this. Thank you. But questions first, I think. Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Jane and Melissa in her absence, for putting this paper together so quickly. I have a couple of questions, one for clarity. First of all, when we look at the grants, the small grants particularly, and they refer to a ward, can I just clarify if that's where the organisation is based, as opposed to that's the strict area that they operate in? Because it is possible that we have a hub in St Bartholomew, particularly at Unit 12, where a lot of these charitable organisations just happen to be based. So if you could just clarify that to start with. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your question. That is right, that when the applicant makes their application to us, they say where the ward in which they are based. So, for example, Unit 12 may have a project that is working across the town, but they will appear here just listed under one individual ward.
Thank you for that clarification. And I'm sure Councillor Batho, when you look at the grants, he'll actually look at, where the work they're doing. The other question I have is, in the crowdfunding, I know I accept Councillor Crass' comments about we didn't spend all of that crowdfunding money, and I actually welcome both the fact that we're going to create one pot, which which is more flexible. I also, in my role as Cabinet Member for Community, have asked for the crowdfunding review to be done because I'm concerned also at a district level that we're not seeing the take up in the crowdfunding and it's not reaching the potential that we'd anticipated. But when we look at those small number of projects, yes, the town only contributed just over 9,625, but as a whole, those organisations raised through the crowdfunder the additional 55,000, which our grant wouldn't, I assume, have been able to cover. So there was an uplift on the money that they provided. The question I have, Jane, is do you have any sense of why people, given when they look at this type of results, that yes, they would have got 1,000 from us on core youth theatre, but potentially 6,000 plus through the crowdfunder? Do you have any sense of why people haven't used the crowdfunder?
Without wanting to sort of preempt the full investigation that we're going to carry out, information that we've had to date has been very varied. In some cases, there are misconceptions around people's understanding of what crowdfunding involves, and we've done lots of information sessions to try and alleviate some of those. Part of it, I think, was timing. So the launch of the crowdfunding platform came at a time just before the pandemic hit, and I think the way that people have fundraised has changed a lot over the last couple of years. So I think that's also had an impact. And crowdfunder have given us some guidance over the last couple of years, and we've slightly changed our approach in recent months to the way we've been encouraging people to crowdfund, and we're looking to see if that's had an effect or not. And I'm currently now surveying lots of organisations to understand a bit better what their views are towards crowdfunding, including people who have been successful on the platform and people who are reluctant to use it. So there are lots of different factors that we're looking at, and I can't sort of pick out one individual thing, but hopefully it will all be a lot clearer when we pull them together for December.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Tibikova.
I will belatedly declare an interest, Chair, because I'm a volunteer director at Unit 12, who are a recipient of one of the small grants and crowdfunding. But apologies for not raising that at the beginning of the meeting. But my question is that I think with these small grants, they make a huge difference because they can be very, very focused. And I just wonder, knowing a lot of these organisations, it does take quite a lot of time to put these applications together. And one of the things that deters the actual application is this worth the time to actually apply for £500? So seeing it double is a really good thing. It's a bit of a comment. But in that vein, is it, in terms of the flexibility this is introducing, is it sensible to increase that even further and possibly put up to £1,500, or is there concern that that's too high, and if so, why?
I guess it's something we could consider. At the moment, we've made a suggestion in this paper to move from £500 to £1,000, and I believe it's been at about £500 10 years. So now seemed like a good point in time to make an adjustment, and whether or not we take that to 1,000 or more.
I think for my... Steve, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to make a small comment around the small grants are kept deliberately simple. We've already discussed the fact that some people find it an overly onerous process, even though we have kept it as streamlined and simple as possible. And I guess it's just striking that balance. You're absolutely right. 1,500 could easily be done if that's the view that members wanted to go down. It's striking the balance between that, and the more money we give, maybe the more requirements we might feel the need to place on applicants in terms of that reporting, that monitoring, that demonstrating good use of the money. So it's all possible. And I mean, in the scheme of things, 1,500 still isn't a huge amount of money in terms of what some of these organisations can do. So it's all possible, and it's just striking that balance of keeping it streamlined.
Thanks, Steve. Jane?
And yeah, just to add to Steve's point, obviously the higher the amount, you tend to find that people will go and request the maximum that they're allowed to ask for. Obviously, we have a discretion to award less, but we may find that by going to a higher level, then you fund less organisations rather than at a higher level in the budget that you have. So yeah, it's a consideration. The other thing to point out is, like Steve said, the process, I know for a lot of organisations feels onerous, but we have a duty to collect a certain amount of information, and we do require grant agreements to be in place and reports to be fed back. So there's a certain amount of structure that we're not able to change, and that we have to abide by, and to counteract that, we try and give as much help and advice to organisations that are thinking of applying as possible, and that's part of my job, to try and help guide them through the process. We're just about to do a few funding advice sessions over the coming months, where people can arrange time for me to help talk them through the process if it's not proving to be straightforward for them. So we try and offer organisations as much help and advice as possible.
Councillor Becker.
Thank you. Just looking at this list of the small grants, lots of them are organisations based at Unit 12, and this is absolutely not a comment about that. It's just a reflection that those organisations are speaking to each other, they're hearing that they're able to apply for these, they're potentially getting help from Unit 12 or others have gone through the process. Is there some sort of assistance we can offer organisations, some sort of peer support where they can help each other apply for these grants and raise awareness? Because clearly, you know, we've got a place like Unit 12 where these organisations are based, and they're all applying and they're all getting the money, and that's fantastic. But we know that there are so many other organisations out there, and if they knew how easy it was, perhaps they would also be applying.
Yes, it's certainly something that we're always looking for different ways of raising awareness for the grants. We try and do as much as we can through social media, through different newsletters, and obviously using members to try and make people aware of what's available to them and the help and support that's out there. But yeah, that's certainly something we could think of.
Councillor Learning, please.
Thank you. I think this is more a question for the grant giving committee, really, around do they feel that there's a challenge between taking a strategic approach to making the biggest impact with our grants? We mentioned the cost of living crisis earlier on. While some of the organisations mentioned in the list are clearly working in those kind of areas, many aren't. How do you feel the approach should be between making sure we help as many organisations as possible with small amounts of money, or should there be a more strategic approach where we're actually trying to tackle some of the bigger problems?
I'm happy to take that one, Jane. I completely agree with you, Councillor Learning, in terms of it does need a strategy around it. We'd set this up, designed to deliver on the vision objectives, which is about enabling our residents and being an enabling councillor and using the grant programme for that to help people. I think as part of the audit, and I know Councillor Batho wants to speak on this as well, as part of the audit, it will be important to look at each of the recipients to see what they have been doing, how successful they've been, what the results have been, to learn from that. To Councillor Becker's point about how we can do more, but then use that to inform a strategy going forward for next year. So that's what's needed to be done, a combination of getting the money out quicker so that we do actually spend it, And what's interesting, Councillor Ferguson, is that the table you can see for on page 35 for 2021, that was for 2021. There was no money actually spent for 21-22. So we significantly underspent last year. Councillor Batho, would you like to chip in now?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and thank you to Jane for presenting the information. It's very useful to have that summary. And coming back to Councillor Ferguson's point, the work that I'm intending to do is sort of through the Town Forum in terms of the grants, is looking at undertaking an audit of very much the same things that we've been discussing, and to Councillor Becker's point, it would be to identify where successful organisations have taken advantage of the grant programme, and to look at services that are being provided by those organisations, and look around the rest of the Town Forum area and identify where there may be gaps that organisation in that successful area has been providing that could be sort of used in other parts of the Town Forum area. And that will be an iterative thing in discussion with Town Forum members, looking at the wards that they're representing, and sort of working out the types of things that could be feasible based upon that audit of identifying the good practice that's being used elsewhere in the Town Forum area. So that is exactly what we're intending to do. And it will work then with the grants programme team in terms of identifying which organisations might be a suitable candidate for that type of funding, and then make an actual sort of approach potentially to them to make a sort of a suggestion about how that sort of organisation might come forward. I've already been doing something of that type of work with Unit 12, who obviously run very successful programmes, one of which is the food pantry. I've had conversations with Week Community Centre about potentially running that in the centre, using support and sort of resource from the Unit 12 funding, organisation. So it's already something that is in my mind, and something that through the audit and this programme, I think will help the rest of the Town Forum area.
Councillor Ferguson.
Chair, I actually had one more question, and I didn't know whether we'd moved into debate, and I'd missed my opportunity to ask the question. Okay, thank you. You commented in your introduction about the fact that the way our governance works for the Town Forum, we tend to be very slow to get the Winchester Town Forum grants programme up and running as we go into each new municipal year. And then that does leave this very small window. And again, potentially with the crowdfunding, I don't know, a question again for Jane, is whether or not that very small window makes people feel there isn't time to get a scheme up and running. But really the question is, and perhaps Dawn can help us address this, is do we have to be that slow? Could we get that grant programme open more quickly once the new municipal year starts? Or do we need this delay? Is there a way around that as an issue? Because if we've only got a very short window, then what we actually see is some groups which are in the town, they apply for the district small grants while they're waiting for the town small grant programme to open. So is there a way around that problem? Thank you.
Steve, please.
We need to go away and actually have a think through one or two issues that it presents. I would be pretty confident that we could make a much better job of having it open for a greater period of time. I'm sure that's possible. There will clearly be a small issue around the pre-election period, when clearly we have to be very careful about things like grant awards, but we could easily structure and time things to work either side of that. That doesn't need to, I wouldn't imagine that would present a huge challenge. There would be something around whether, for example, we could continue running the grant programme right up to the point. So, it could almost run 12 months right up to the point where you reappoint a new grant panel for the year, and then they can revisit their priorities for the next 12 months. Whether that, I can't see why that would have to all shut down prior to March, and because that does lose a whole. I'm sure there's opportunities to do that and make a much better job of it. We just need to go away and just think it through and work that through with our governance colleagues and make sure that we're across board.
Thank you, Steve. And Dawn?
Just to agree with Steve and say, you know, absolutely, we're open to looking at process as well as strategy and policy here. So we'll put it all together.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions. I think in the first one, I'm probably thinking along similar lines to Councillor Learning, but I was wondering whether it would be possible to do an analysis of the grants given by sector. We've seen some limitations in the cut by geography, you know, who's working with homelessness and so on. I'm thinking ahead, bearing in mind the announcement the Council's made today, all the work that Councillor Ferguson and others have done on our response to the cost of living crisis. We might need to be much more targeted, allocate grants going. And that kind of analysis might be helpful if it were possible. And I also, if I may, Chair, just wanted to ask, I don't quite understand, and that's my problem, but please help me, the relationship between the total raised and WCC match funding. I mean, in a simple world, match funding is you give a quid, I give a quid, but it's obviously not that. And are there things we could be doing to make it simpler for ourselves by backing organisations who are doing the right things and were very effective at raising money you might genuinely match?
Yes. So in answer to your first point, yeah, we can definitely look at categorising organisations that we've funded based on the type of issues that they're addressing. At the moment, the criteria for the town fund grants is very broad, and that enables people to apply for all sorts of different types of funding, but there's no reason why we couldn't make that tighter in the future if that was the wish. And then secondly, on the way the match funding works, you don't see an exact pound for pound match in some of these instances. The total raise column, for example, if you take the first line of the Lido, they raised £9,810. Of that, we provided £3,000 in match funding. At that time, £3,000 was our maximum award, so they weren't able to get any larger grant from us, but they continued to raise more from the crowd. In some cases, because of the sorts of funds that projects that people are raising money for, they're not the sort of things that we can give grants towards. So they may have a large project of £10,000 that they're looking to raise money for. Of that, there's a portion that we can match fund, so they end up with a smaller contribution from the council. So that explains a bit the differences.
Very good, thank you, Jane. So unless there's anything else, either questions or debate, we have very good. So, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I welcome this paper, given that there is such a small window and we do have an underspend on our grant. I welcome the flexibility. I also welcome the uplift in the limit for the small grants from 500 to 1,000. It's also something that we're already discussing for the district small grants, because we are aware that there is a cost of living pressure on some of our small voluntary groups, and we are looking to change the criteria where a proportion of the small grant could be used to cover those additional cost of living costs for those groups. If that money had to come out of £500, it would leave very, very little left to do anything with. I am slightly concerned that if we raise the limit even higher, that we may exclude some groups. Often we have a flurry of people applying late in the day. For some reason, people wait till the final deadline. It happens with the district grants as well. So I wouldn't almost want us to find the pot is empty. If you remember from the vision, one of the key messages which I really took away was that 100 small wins. People were really exercised by the idea that a small thing could make a big difference. And often these small grants act as a catalyst, or they act as seed money to help get an idea or an organisation off the ground. So while I take on board that we may want to think strategically when we look at the funding for next year, and I know this is almost an interim paper for this time, I wouldn't want to see the entire pot taken up with a small few strategic grants, which then remove that seed money for those smaller organisations for the broadest possible geographical area to get them going for the first time. To me, a lot of the issue is around some of the support we can give for those fledgling organisations who perhaps haven't applied before. And I would like to, just in this comment, give thanks particularly to Jane Sheeran and the community team, because I know they've gone above and beyond to help promote these grants and support organisations applying for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Some very valuable comments there. Appreciate that. Councillor Tippicooper.
I'll be very, very quick. And just to say that this paper does reflect, I think, the reality that many community organisations and charities are facing in terms of the amount of resources they have. Crowdfunding is, and actually setting up your own fundraiser is quite an intensive process to actually get it going, advertise it, organise it, and can actually sometimes be much harder than, say, for example, these small grant applications, which you can do quickly and effectively. And that's why this is really very sensible, because crowdfunding takes more time, applying for a small grant takes less, and in terms of the resources of these organisations at the moment, they're much more stretched. So it's a paper that really reflects the reality on the ground. And in terms of, I completely agree with Councillor Ferguson that these are 19 organisations on the small grants list, for example. That's 19 small wins right there. And coming from a position where I work a lot of these sort of organisations, feedback about the officer team is absolutely brilliant from all the charities that apply. So Jane and the team, it's really, really appreciated. So very much welcome this paper, and I think we should all it.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Very good. Well, I really can't add to that very much other than just agreeing with what both Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Tippett-Cooper stated. And just to support, I too would like to see the money being spent as widely as possible. Not all the grants that were given out by the small grants were for the full amount of 500. So I wouldn't expect all the grants to be automatically for the full amount of the increase to 1,000. That would certainly be my expectation, and I'd be uncomfortable in raising it to 1,500 at this stage while we do this pilot, I might say, in terms of seeing how it goes. Perhaps if there were a group that had a track record of spending money successfully and they were looking to extend that service, perhaps, but I think that would be more the exception than the rule. But no, I think it's been a very good small grants program in particular last year, very successful, and hopefully we can push on and have an equally, and if not certainly more successful one for the year ahead. So thank you, Jane, Melissa, and Steve and Dawn. I do need to go through that, but there are a lot of things we have to recommend here, isn't there? I'll quickly run through because there is a lot. So we've noted the achievement successes and the review of the crowdfund contract. There is an important role for members, but we're going to supplement that with Councillor Batho in particular. There is more work, I think, and I with working with Sue Robbins as well as the corporate head of community economy and community to look at the grant criteria and allocations, extend the award from 500 to 1,000. I have to say, do we approve? Okay, do we approve? Thank you, Councillor Becker. Do we approve the item 4, the delegated authority to be given to the corporate head of economy and community to approve the grant criteria and allocations in consultation with the Town Forum Vision Group? I'll do them all, okay. 5, reopening the small grants scheme with immediate effect with the following updates. A, increasing the maximum award from 500 to 1,000 in response to the cost of living crisis and rising inflation. B, amending the criteria to include an element of core costs where the cost of living is having an impact on the organisation. 6, reopening the crowdfunding Winchester Town Community Fund with immediate effect until the 15th of November 2022 with the following updates. A, amending the criteria to include an element of core costs where the cost of living is having an impact on the organisation. And finally, 7, the 40,000 grant budget is to be used flexibly to allocate funds between different grant programmes to meet the demand for small grants and crowdfunding. Do we approve? Thank you very much. Which then moves on to the final item, or the final large item, which is the KGV new build pavilion request for additional budget, CAB 3363. And for this one, we have Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, there have been some comments about this paper already, but if I may, I'd like to take us back slightly. Today, the Town Forum is asked to agree an additional allocation of Townsill of £200,000, bringing the funds from Townsill to £450,000 towards the cost of the procurement of the new pavilion at KGV, King Charles V playing fields. Because this additional sill is required because the cost of building the pavilion, which were really originally estimated to be 2.3, have now risen to 3.1, and I'll go into the details of that. It's important to remember that back in 2018, when the council produced a playing pitch strategy, it identified the need to replace the pavilions at King Charles V playing fields for ones that were more up to date, more accessible, and more in line with what are considered Football Federation specifications. The Town Forum itself started talking about the need for a pavilion, a new pavilion at KGV back in 2020. And in fact, last year allocated the funds when Cabinet agreed the funding for the new sports pavilion. At the time, it was recognised that there was a need to replace the 2 outdated, underused and inaccessible pavilions with a single, larger, accessible, and importantly right now, with the cost of energy prices, more sustainable modern facility. This was in order to support the continued development of grassroots football in Winchester and the wider district, particularly the women's, girls and youth football, and also to provide a hub of quality sports along with the new Winchester Sports and Leisure Park and also the facilities at the Winchester University. The pavilion that's being proposed, sorry, I don't know why this is cutting out. The pavilion, yeah, putting me off my stride. The pavilion that's being proposed is will also have a club room, which will be able to be used by the community for community events and other activities when it's not being used for sports and leisure. We know that many clubs regularly use the nearby grounds and that they require better facilities and indeed enhanced facilities, ones that are modern, importantly accessible. And we know that there is a great demand for the use of these pitches and these pavilions. In fact, one of the teams that plays at KGB is the Winchester City Flyers. This is perhaps the largest female grassroots football club in the UK, with 22 youth teams, 3 senior teams, and more than 480 girls and ladies registered players. We also know that this particular team is looking to expand as it builds on the success of the Lionesses' achievements in the recent European Cup. The reason why we're coming to the Town Forum for the additional agreement of additional town sill is, as I said, because we've gone out to tender to build the pavilion, which everyone agreed was much needed, and the tender costs have come back up 1 million above what we were expecting. This is almost wholly due to a significant increase in the cost of construction in terms of materials and resources, attributed primarily to rapidly rising costs, the impact of inflationary pressures, and also the additional demand in the construction industry. We know there were a significant number of contractors who provided a full tender for the build, and each of them was very indicative of the rising amount of costs. We know that given that the tenders were very close in range, that these were representative of a broader range of what we might expect if we saw other project bids come forward. The paper looks at whether or not there's an alternative to not go ahead with the project at this stage. We did look at whether or not it might be possible to consider a redesign, which would then potentially require a new planning permission. And then that would have to go through planning again. It would have to go through the same procurement process. And one of the indicators in the construction industry is that very much costs are likely to continue to increase. So what we could have is we could design something that's simpler, and then we could come back and find that that simpler pavilion will just cost the same again. The other thing to note is that this pavilion is also attracting a significant grant from the Football Federation, and it has to be built to exacting standards, which is being done. I know for the community, they've waited a long time, the Highcliffe community, for a community facility, and the pavilion, as well as providing exceptional facilities for those teams that play on that site, will also provide very important community facilities for the people in Highcliffe. So we've got Graham Todd with us, who I'm sure will be happy to answer any questions, but I hope that's enough of an introduction. Councillor Krask.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Any questions? Unless, Graham, you would like to add anything, perhaps?
No, thank you, Chair. Councillor Ferguson introduced it very well.
Very good. Thank you again. I'm sure you can be available to answer any questions that the members have. Any questions, please? Councillor Tippett-Cooper, please.
Thanks for that, Councillor Ferguson. That was really very clear. A quick question. Have we gone back to the Football Foundation to see whether they would revisit the size of their grant, given the circumstances are out of our control?
In fact, thank you for asking, Councillor Tippett-Cooper. That's one of the first things that we did in fact do. And Cora Rogers in our natural environment team went back to them, and they have indicated that at this time they can't provide any additional funding. In fact, the grant I believe that they have offered for this particular pavilion is one of the largest. Is that correct, Mrs. Adey?
Yes, that's correct. But Graham said that this morning at Cabinet, so that's correct.
And Councillor Cooper?
Noting that Nuffield Health have recently sponsored the amazing Winchester Flyers, I wonder whether once this is potentially built, would there be any barriers to us seeking, I suppose, sponsorship opportunities for the pavilion itself as a potential revenue stream? Something to think about, perhaps.
Councillor Ferguson?
Thank you for the suggestion, Councillor Cooper. One thing I can say is I know again that the Natural Environment team have been looking to see if there are any other sources of grant funding that perhaps could be put towards these costs. So far they've drawn a blank, but if there's potential, then I'm sure they will look at it. The other thing to say is that when we go through it, because we're currently in a sort of tendering process, but when we go through the procurement, we will be looking at the costs to make sure to see if there are any, if there's any value engineering that we can apply to try and bring down the overall cost, but certainly to try and keep it within this new budget. So very much, if there's money to be had, we'll find it, and if there's costs that we can reduce, but that doesn't deflect from the fact that this pavilion is much needed, both for the teams at the site and also for the community. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Becker.
Thank you. I know you went through this at Cabinet, but just for the benefit of those that weren't here, given that we are currently in a procurement situation, can you confirm if we delay, do we expect that costs will increase over and above what they currently are?
Thank you, Councillor Becker. Yes, so the RCS's Building Cost Information Centre does forecast for the next 5 years construction costs will continue.
And Councillor Reach, please.
Thank you for that. Could you just, and it'll be, I mean, if we approve this, it'll be fantastic for the people of Highcliffe, Bar End, that part of the city, but could we also just understand a bit more about how it might be used across the district? I understand teams from right across the Winchester district would use it. I'm just interested to hear a bit more about that, please.
If I may, Chair. Yes, that's an important point to note. It does say in the report that in fact the current users of the site are drawn, 70% of those users are actually drawn from across the district, and it names teams from not only the city but Littleton, Kingsworthy, Sutton Scotney, down Bishop's Waltham, down into the southern parishes. Because the Winchester City Flyers in many ways is the preeminent female football club for women's teams across Hampshire, it does also draw people from outside the district. But there are youth teams that also play there, and we do expect a significant uplift in particularly women's football. The pavilions also, I think I'm right in saying, Mr. Todd, are also correct for cricket as well. They're up to the Cricket Federation, if that's such a thing, standard.
I think it's the English Cricket Board.
I'm obviously not a cricketer, I know a lot more about football, but it is very much a district facility. I think for the town though, we have to recognise that there are many young girls and many young people who play there also from the city. And if anyone read the article that was recently published in the local newspaper, there was a fantastic story of a young girl who started playing when she was at Stanmore Primary School when she was 8. She talks about having not very many friends, not very high self-esteem, but she went and played football, which she took all the way through with her through her school years, and now has actually become a football coach, and she has her own business. So yes, across the district, but also it will sit at the heart of the city.
Very good, thank you. I think we've exhausted questions. Any debate? Councillor Becker.
Thank you. I'd just like to express my extremely strong support for this project. It offers the town and the district benefits for those currently underrepresented in terms of sport. It offers facilities specifically designed for women, for girls, and with fully accessible community facilities for those with disabilities as well. I mean, the result by the Lionesses this summer, which was incredible in the Euros, shows the value and the potential for women's sport. But those results can really only be achieved when there are proper facilities available. And what this offers is a pavilion that is designed for women, for girls, with changing facilities that welcome them. I think research shows that the lack of proper changing facilities is a real barrier to girls getting involved in sport and staying involved in sport. So this can address that problem. It also offers properly designed accessible facilities so the community, all members of the community, are able to access and use this facility. So, I mean, the needs of these groups have not decreased over time, even though the costs have increased. If anything, the needs have increased. So we need to keep moving forward with this project. So I urge everybody to support this project.
And Councillor Edwards.
Yes, I too very strongly support this additional, sadly necessary investment. I think it's worth noting that this is just one part of a whole network of sports facilities in South East Winchester. Not just council funded and socially funded, but also private investment in the southern part of the city, so that we are beginning to, well, more than beginning, to establish a real reputation as a centre of excellence in the provision of places and facilities to do sport. And that's another powerful string in Winchester's bow. So there is something about the branding and economic future of the city too, even if that seems a little far-fetched from a changing pavilion by a football field. But we should see it in that bigger picture.
Okay, and Councillor Ferguson.
Obviously, I know I'm bringing this paper, but one of the things I wanted to add was that this is very much about health and well-being. There are both the physical benefits and the mental well-being benefits of being able to play sports and having good facilities. And particularly during a cost of living crisis, this may be an outlet that people can afford and continue to afford. And I believe, Mr. Todd, that if this is approved today and then again approved at full council, we will see this pavilion come forward very quickly, and we could hope to see it finished, within a reasonable time frame. I'm hesitating to say exactly when.
Do you want me to add to that? So, subject to approval of additional budget, we anticipate starting on site in January 2023, completion October, November 2020. Councillor Tipper-Cooper.
Just to endorse what's already been said, I massively support this this project, and I think it's extremely exciting for Winchester as a city to potentially become a hub for women and girls football, not just in Hampshire but in the sort of south of England. I think in terms of looking at the pounds and pence extra that's being spent here purely out of necessity because of the global circumstances, the amount of social value it delivers is going to be increase at a much higher amount, I would argue, particularly given the increased demand in women and girls football since the Lionesses' successes. So this makes perfect sense for me. We'll get a huge amount of value out of these premises, precisely for the reasons that Councillor Ferguson, Councillor Becker and others have very eloquently outlined.
Very good, thank you, Councillor Tipper-Cooper. And there's probably not much more I can add to the very, very eloquent explanations and debate to that point. Anything for me to just say is to to recognise that it is a fantastic facility that is very much in line with who we are and what we're trying to do for the people of Winchester. And it will be a fantastic facility for the district and as Councillor Ferguson points out beyond the district as well. So I welcome the funding proposal that is put forward and completely support that, and certainly welcome the additional contributions from the district SIL and the capital receipts as well. So I think with that, we need to go through a number of recommendations. Just one, actually. We just have one. We just have one. That we approve an additional 200,000 of town SIL funding, bring the total funding from town SIL to 450,000. Are we in agreement? Very good. Thank you all. Apologies that we are overrunning time. We have 2 items left: informal group verbal updates and just a report on the work programme. Andy Key has been sitting patiently for a good hour and a half or so. Andy, we did have a very extensive and exhaustive discussion, but I very appreciate you coming forward, and if members wouldn't mind, I would like to invite you for your 3-minute contribution to the meeting, if you would. But we won't respond because there was far more responses than you could imagine given, which will all be on the recording on the website.
Okay, as I missed Mike Slynn's piece, I'm assuming that what he was proposing on behalf of Kings Barton Residents Association has not changed from what a while ago. Keep Andover Road open to traffic, but also keep Avenue. I'm here as a core member of the core team of Cycle Winchester local campaign group. We don't have a set view on whether Winchester Road would be the best road route in Winchester. We are concerned about 2 things in the proposals that Barton Residents Association have been putting forward. First is that in the current plans, as they stand, the section of Andover Road they're talking about is due to be replaced by a cycle route. While that route doesn't solve all the cycle access problems on that side of Winchester, it's a big sign that the county and city councils are serious about encouraging people to cycle into town rather than driving. Serious about the Winchester movement strategy and about the climate change policies of both councils. If Andover Road stays open as it is now, that cycle route is gone. Cycle route plans rely on Andover Road not being a through route. KBRA have suggested that a cycle path could be built alongside Andover Road anyway. So they can't tell us who's going to pay for that, and it's unlikely for the developers will step forward and offer to pay for a completely different plan. More likely is that such a cycle path would join the long list of active travel facilities that might be built, maybe, someday. But this still might be fine if there were adequate cycling facilities being built, quick and easy cycle travel along Winchester Avenue through. But there aren't. You can already see that just from what's been built so far. Narrow paths, narrow service roads intermittently blocked by wooden planters and raised curbs, side roads that have priority over the main road cycle route. It doesn't look good. But this still might be fine if Winchester Avenue were instead to be made a low traffic neighbourhood with no through access for motor vehicles. Sure, it means that yet again cyclists go the long way round while motorists go the short direct route. It would be a useful active travel route. KBRA suggests keeping both roads open to motor traffic. If there's one thing we've learned from decades of manic road building, it's that having two roads into a city where there used to be one doesn't solve any problems. It just means more traffic expanding to fill both those routes. More traffic congestion where the two routes combine, more congestion at the Carfax junction, more traffic to discourage people from cycling on the road. Blows a hole in the Winchester movement strategy before it's even got properly started. It means the Kings Barton development does nothing to reduce the traffic clogging Winchester streets and nothing to improve the quality of life for the people who live there. It's been suggested that Kings Barton should be a low traffic neighbourhood, or LTN. Great, but that does mean no through route for motor traffic. That's how LTNs work. So our challenge to Kings Barton Residents Association is, which route do you want to keep open? Pick one. And our challenge to both councils and to Carla, if you're going to rethink the plan for Andover Road and Winchester Avenue, please make sure it's better for cycling and walking, not worse. By all means, add new cycling-friendly routes, but not at the cost of losing others that are already planned and budgeted for. Please don't implement any solution that will encourage yet more traffic and more streets.
Very good. Thank you, Andy. I think it was a very valuable contribution. It's a shame you weren't at the earlier session. I wish you were, because I think you said what a lot of other people were trying to say in a very short space of time. So thank you very much for that. And thank you, Andy. Much appreciated. So thank you for your indulgence, members. Informal group updates. I'll kick off with this one in terms of the planning for the future of Winchester, and particularly in terms of the local plan. I held a town forum Zoom meeting on the 5th of September to educate people on the Sheila sites. The first time I think we tried to do something like this, and I from the feedback, I think it went very well. We had good contribution both from Jackie Porter as Cabinet Member for Place and Plan, and also good contribution from residents and the City of Winchester Trust. So that was a good exercise, which is recorded and now available for you to share with residents. The site allocations, Dawn, you can probably help me with this one. They're available live as of today, I think. Yeah, just wanted to make sure. So the consultation process will proceed as planned, with scrutiny of that plan taking place at a special all-day scrutiny meeting on the 29th. So that's probably enough from me on that. If I could invite others to speak to their groups, that would be appreciated. Councillor Radcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. This is on the Parks and Recreation informal group. We've just discussed the state of play at KGV, but I do have a few updates on other parks matters. First, on North Walls River Park, where, as you know, the council has adopted an ambitious 10-year programme of improvements. As in the case of the KGV pavilion, soaring construction costs are creating challenges here too. Officers are working hard on costings for the initial phase of planned works, and a technical study is being carried out. I hope and I expect that we will have more information for the forum on this at the time of our next meeting, but work is ongoing. On improvements at St Giles Hill, I'm sorry to say progress has been very slow. Some sundry works have been undertaken. For example, some steps have been repaired, some railings have been repainted close to the lookout, and a tree survey has been carried out. But larger scale works remain some way off pending agreement of a new park management plan. And as members may recall, 8 months ago, we endorsed a proposal for an ambitious new 5-year plan to be drawn up for the park at the top of St Giles. We discussed the need to repair pathways, steps, railings, park furniture, open up the sweeping views to the west and south, improve biodiversity, and make the park more accessible. Since then, I've gathered and fed through to officers dozens of further practical suggestions for improvements from local residents and others with a passion for this place. And there really is enormous community interest and support for a programme of investment and improvements, and a number of local volunteers who are eager to help. But unfortunately, due to severe ongoing staffing constraints in the council team responsible for natural environment, we still don't have a draft park management plan for St Giles, or even a date by which we can expect one. Once we have that draft, it will be put out for public consultation before it's finalised and brought back to this body. I can't stress enough that officers are doing all they can. They're juggling multiple competing priorities, but the time it's taking to produce this plan, let alone begin implementing it, speaks volumes about our threadbare staffing structures. That said, let me end with some good news. Work is advancing on playground improvements. The refurbishment of the popular Abbey Gardens play area has begun. Officers carried out an exemplary consultation to gauge what users and their families wanted to see there. Construction has now started and will take up to 6 months. I know for many people, myself included, perhaps surprised at that 6-month time frame, but it is more complicated, the works there, than it might appear. Proximity to water channels creates drainage issues. Multiple tenders have been required for different elements of the work, which include not just the removal of equipment, the removal of surfacing, resurfacing, drainage, design, installation of new equipment, and planting. But we will end up with a fantastic new play area for Winchester. The next play area in line for refurbishment is the one in North Walls Recreation Ground, adjacent to the former leisure centre, and work is expected to start here in early spring next year. And finally, good news for anyone who enjoys a coffee while exercising in North Walls Recreation Ground. Thanks to the work of our parks officers and with support from Councillor Ferguson, we now have a lovely coffee truck stationed at the entrance to the park 3 days a week. This is on a trial basis and it will be reviewed in due course.
Very good, thank you, Councillor Radcliffe. Councillor Edwards, perhaps?
Perhaps. Yeah, just a few words from the city centre informal group. You'll remember that the council allocated additional funds of £185,000 for street scene improvement this year. So this is just a quick 6-monthly update, I guess, on how a great deal of work by officers and contractors is already bearing fruit. To go through the list quickly: high street benches repaired and replaced as necessary. The 7 steel and wood sort of contemporary design benches that are a feature of the high street and not in good shape are going to be refurbished by the manufacturer after the new year. The planters on top of security blocks, which have proved unpopular and unsuccessful and extremely unpopular with our leader, amongst others. One planter was removed yesterday so that that block can be used for seating, and if that's successful, the same change will be made to the other blocks over the winter. I imagine, yeah, Councillor Todd will be sitting on it every day to demonstrate how
I've not sat
popular
on
it
it,
is.
but every time I've walked past it, there are people sitting on it.
Great. Litter bins that a number of city centre ward councillors have grumpy about with due cause. Litter bins, it has been agreed, are being replaced or, where feasible, repaired in the same style across the city centre this year. We're also tidying up the commercial bin store behind God Begot House, which has been of a disgrace, I think it's fair to say. That's being done shortly, and we are hoping to create a new bin store in a different location, but that's very much on. Require additional funding. Working with Winchester Bid, there's been a blitz on graffiti Chesil multi-storey car park, I'm sure you know, has suffered especially badly, and so anti-graffiti paint and extra CCTV are in line for there and elsewhere. Cleaning and maintenance of public toilets, this list gets better and better, have been stepped up, whilst a comprehensive strategy for future refurbishment or replacement, and something which its best iteration would capital item go. And smaller works in the pipeline include more regular jet cleaning of the side passages of High Street, new tourist information boards, and increased weed spraying. Hampshire having cut their spraying, but not the weeds, by 50%. And finally, not part of the 185,000, but a legacy update due to some unforeseen problems. The start of work on the St. Maurice Covert mural has been delayed, but it remains the council's intention for it to be completed this financial year.
Very good, thank you, Councillor Edward. Lots of wonderful small wins there, and maybe some larger ones as well. Councillor Tipper Cooper.
Thank you, Councillor Crass. I have some more small wins for you, Councillor. Very first, I'd like to say thank you to Hyde 900, get that on record, for their superb community dig weekend, in which the local news and national news picked up on the exciting culvert found for Terrace, which wasn't in my back garden, but they did have a trench in my back garden, so that's excellent. And they've got their King Alfred weekend coming up at the end of October, the 20th, 23rd. In terms of the small wins, King Alfred, the statue, has been successfully waxed, and he's now looking splendid. It's very, very good news. I think, actually, before I get to that point, I think it's important to make clear that obviously last year the City Council invested £450,000 into heritage sites, showing the real commitment the City Council has to its heritage assets. And King Alfred's is one example of where that money has been spent to really preserve the things that are important to the city. There are a couple of nooks. I'll just get this right. There's a couple of cracks in King Alfred's cloak, but they've been monitored and they've been looked after and they've been treated. And there's a little bit of green leading in a bronze plaque. So, but is that leaching? Oh, sorry, Graham, it's leaching. And I clearly know what that is, but I can reassure you it's being looked at and looked after, which is what we want to do with all our heritage sites. Nun Stream wall in Hyde caused quite a lot of concern when that fell. The update with that is that it is very specialist work to repair it, but a contractor has been identified that should be able to do the work, and officers now engaging to arrange that and look into what that will involve. At Hyde Gate, the pigeon proofing is working much better now, real progress there. The 2 strands of work planned on Hyde Gate are looking very positive. The structural repair work and restoration, there was a summer survey undertaken at the request of Historic England, that we basically do further surveys before we can start that structural work. So that's ongoing, and the second strand of work is the public realm work, and I think the officer team and the cabinet team are going to look into that in a bit more detail. You know, obviously with heritage assets, the actual cost to deliver improvements, changes, restoration is very high and increasingly high. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can and getting the best value from the money we've allocated to the city. So there'll be some discussions there. And I think that's probably it for now, unless there's any questions, of course.
Councillor Edwards.
Not a question, but just a codicil. There is a very small but very interesting exhibition at Hampshire County Records Office at the moment about the 1970s excavations in Winchester, and I commend it. It's open, I think, for another 3 or 4 weeks.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Unless there's any other questions, I think we have wrapped up the reports from the informal group. So thank you very much for that. It just leaves us a moment to review the work programme at point 10. There's a suggestion that we have a tree survey coming in November. That was something that Steve spoke to me about, Dawn. So that's something to add to there. We still need to book in University of Southampton either for January or March, if we could. Only 2 adjustments I can see. I would imagine that we might do something around the local plan in November, Dawn. Yes. Either at the 9th of November or perhaps a separate event, perhaps. But I can imagine and would encourage residents perhaps to come to that 9th of November if there's anything they have to contribute verbally. I think that might be a nice opportunity. So anything for anybody else on the forward plan? Councillor Batho.
Thank you, Chair. I thought there was an item on the forward agenda to review multiple use games areas. I thought it was in the programme for November, and I think, at the June meeting suggest that might be brought forward to this meeting in September. I've actually had a quick look because I couldn't see it on this one, back to the June agenda. I can't even see it on that one. So I don't know whether there's a bit of changes to the agendas historically, but I thought there was that item actually on the programme for the June meeting.
Thank you for raising that, Councillor Batho. It seems like it was discussed last year and to be moved forward into this year. In the meantime, it's been taken to HEP. But maybe that's something that you and I can take a look at, the HEP report, and see what we might want to do in terms of the town forum in that regard.
Yes.
To clarify, I think it was added into the youth programme, Councillor. I'm looking at you, Councillor Ferguson, because you were chair of HEP at the time, and they were doing a review of the youth facilities across the district, and that included looking at the muggers.
So it actually got put into the health and wellbeing strategy, which was to come to HEP at the next meeting. That has been, it was a health and wellbeing strategy update. That has been put back due to pressure on officer time. So I'm no longer chair of HEP, but I'm sure Mrs. Adey can take this up with the chair of HEP.
I certainly will, thank you. We are presenting about our current health and wellbeing offer at the next HEP. And you took it to HEP because looking at muggers in Winchester in isolation of the district-wide offer wouldn't have given you a satisfactory conclusion as to how yours sits in that. So it was taken there, and yes, put into that piece of work. So we're starting that at the next HEP, in regards to where we currently are and what we're currently doing, and then looking forward to how we develop the strategy from.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Batho. I do like difficult questions. So thank you very much for that. I know it's something close to your heart in terms of muggers and the audit of leisure facilities across the town. So that's something we'll continue to work on together, I'm sure. So with that, I think all there is for me to do is to close the meeting. I do want to express my apologies for having the meeting run on, and my thanks for the time that was given over from this meeting to residents and listen to their contributions. So thank you all for that. With the time being 9:11, this meeting is now closed.